In this episode of the Business of E-commerce, I talk with Jim Coleman about how to get started outsourcing customer support. This is the Business of E-commerce, episode 155. Welcome to the Business of E-commerce, the show that helps e-commerce retailers start, launch, and grow the e-commerce business. I'm your host, Charles Plesky, and I'm here today with Jim Coleman. Jim is the co-founder of xFusion, where they provide outsourced customer support for e-commerce businesses. I asked Jim on the show today to talk about if you're a founder and you're thinking of hiring your first support person or outsourcing support, what are some of the do's and don'ts, and what are some things you should absolutely do to make your first support hire or outsource successful? He works with a lot of e-commerce retailers, so I think he brings some great advice to the table and has some great tips here. So let's get into the show. And if you have any questions, leave them in the show notes and I can forward them over to Jim. So let's get into this. So hey, Jim, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, Charles. How are you?
Good. Awesome to have you on the show. Kind of excited to dig into the topic of customer support and outsourcing. It's very near and dear to my heart. So,
Totally.
So real quick, so you run an agency, outsourcing support, essentially, right?
We do, yeah. It's called xFusion.io, and we provide customer support, customer success to founders. We started kind of scratching our own itch. My co-founder, David, and I are both business owners, and we built out a team internally on each of our companies, and then wanted to bring that to the broader market. So that we kicked off mid-2019, and it's been growing since then.
Okay. Yeah. So I feel like support is one of those things where it's usually one of the first things you're trying to word this correctly, the biggest time sink at the beginning where you're just spending a ton of back and forth. And a lot of founders want to kind of get it off their plate early, but I don't think a lot know how or know the right way. Maybe they're like running out of their inbox or just there's no docs. They're just kind of doing everything out of their own head. What do you kind of see there? Do you folks usually come to you at the beginning when, hey, I'm a founder, I'm doing 100% of support and I want to get this moving somewhere else? Or where do folks usually start there?
We have a really nice mix of both. So we have solo founders that come to us and they're just overwhelmed and swallowed up in support requests and other responsibilities. And then we also work with existing teams to help them scale. I enjoy both, but I particularly enjoy working with founders because of the wins that we can help them achieve at the earlier level. And what I mean is just that we like to focus on helping founders get back to the highest and best use of their time. And I recognize that like everybody has to make the decision on like when is the right time to pull the trigger for them. And I recognize that, we have to build up revenue before we have the bandwidth to be able to hire a team to handle support. But one thing I like to consider is like if you're at that place where you can afford to do so and you don't, then you're spending a good chunk of time working on tasks that are not the highest and best use of your time. In other words, things that other people can effectively handle for you, and you're not working on areas of the business that only you can handle. So what we've seen is that once a founder will kind of take that jump and hire us to handle support, they really free up a lot of their time, and that allows them to move forward at a much faster pace than the other ways would. So I really enjoy talking to founders and just discussing their business with them and helping them get those early wins.
What would you say if someone was kind of sitting there thinking about it? Because you have this obviously, outsource or do I hire someone, a direct hire full time? If someone's kind of weighing that back and forth, what would you kind of tell them, like how they should be looking at that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we don't compete with, or we like to think of ourselves as not competing with other outsourced companies, but rather with the idea of hiring internal versus external. And what I mean is like a lot of outsourced companies will provide a resource to answer tickets, for example, on a per response basis. So the idea is that one agent might be shared across 5 or 7 clients, and they'll sort of go into multiple different inboxes, and it's really hard to get high quality support. I'm just not a fan of that. So all of our agents are full-time dedicated. We really focus on the customer experience, and we believe that if you deliver that next level customer experience, that it'll pay off in time. And think like brands like Chick-fil-A. There's just something magical about what they do. Southwest Airlines, Zappos, there's a lot of these that they provide next level support, and it creates the culture in their brand and their brand's reputation, and really helps take them to the next level. So that's the idea. Like we're providing that level of service So yeah, I mean, it depends on the founder's priorities and what they're looking to do. There's certainly pros and cons of each approach, but one of the pros, I guess, of outsourcing would be the built-in management as well. So we provide redundant agents to help cover the inbox, and then we also provide leadership and management over the inbox as well. So it really just depends on where the founder's at and how involved they want to be in the process.
Yeah, it's nice to have the redundancy, right? Because even if it's dedicated, that person's obviously going to have like time off at some point. And I've done that before where, back in the day, there was one support person here. And when they're not here, you as the founder kind of have to step back into support. And having a backup, that's the biggest thing. When you go from 1 to 2, then all of a sudden like, all right, now but if you can't do that, then it's nice having a backup.
Yeah.
When a founder is starting, how do you get someone, let's say I'm doing it full time, right? Like I'm doing support myself as a founder. How do you get them to basically like download their thought process, their brain into something that someone else can pick up and run with? Like, what does that process look like?
It's really important. I think that if we broaden that out just a little bit wider and kind of look at a 30,000 foot perspective, I'm really a fan of, it's kind of funny. It's funny that this is related in my mind, but back in the day I was in law enforcement and I went through sort of the law enforcement pursuit driving course, and we're blazing around the track, and they told me that smooth is fast and fast is smooth. And I've related that to the business world and saying that, like, look, if we are going too fast in our business where we don't have time to document the process, where we're not building out process maps and we're sort of carefully documenting what we do and how we do it, then in my opinion, we're moving too fast. It's the idea of building a skyscraper on a sand foundation versus on concrete. So I really encourage founders to take the time to document the processes. So for example, like if you answer a regular ticket or the same type of ticket on a regular basis, to just take a moment to document the process to do that. And you're basically creating training assets and also just like other processes in your business. Like one of the things we do is we provide back office support as well. So not just customer support, but back office tasks, things that are just kind of, fairly simple tasks, but that are also time consuming. So, and I also tell the founders that we work with, it's like, at first, this is going to be more painful than beneficial to you. And what I mean by that is you're going to have to slow down your regular output and work with us to train the initial agent as to what you want them to do, what their responsibilities are going to be. But then you'll be able to accelerate after that person takes on the responsibilities you've had. And then from that point, we create training assets and also support assets. So internal and external support docs, processes in the inbox, all of that. And then we handle the training of future agents as our clients scale. But yeah, it's just important for the founder to take a moment and document those processes. And I've seen that pay off so many times and be really beneficial as founders grow.
This week's episode is sponsored by Repricing. Repricing is a competitor price tracking and repricing tool that helps e-commerce companies make intelligent pricing decisions. Using a dashboard and daily Excel reports, online sellers can monitor price changes and immediately make pricing adjustments. Here are some features that I love about Repricing. First is Smart Match. What Smart Match does is allows Repricing to search for your competitors and attach their prices right on your dashboard so you can monitor their pricing changes against competitors you already know about. They find competitors you didn't even know existed. Once you have that, you can configure your repricing rules. What this does is you can now set your prices to be based on the average price, the lowest price, the highest price of your competitors, go up and down. And also you can say, don't go lower than my cost by plus $5. Whatever you want to do, you can set these rules and Repricing will automatically adjust your prices. Next is price change notifications. You can set rules to when prices change. Repricing will send you a notification alerting you of your competitors' pricing changes. Last but not least is a price history. You can then go in to the dashboard and look up all the pricing changes over time that Repricing has been monitoring. That way you know just because it's lower today, they might just be having a sale and it might come back tomorrow. You can see all your competitors on one chart. Super cool. I urge you to check it out. Thanks again for Repricing for sponsoring this week's episode. Now back to the show. Yeah, I think a lot of people get hung up thinking it has to be this like perfect thing from the beginning, right? Like it has to be this like golden document that's like a PDF and you can like send it to everyone. And what I've always tried to do, at least my approach here, is like if you're getting the same question even 2 or 3 times, just create like a KB article. It can be pretty basic, like almost you're basically just answering that person's question, but now in a KB article, and just send it to them. And then next time, take that same KB article and just like add something or do something and just make it a little better. And at some point, it becomes the document. It really is like the definitive guide to whatever. And each time you send it to someone, it's just going to get better and you're going to refine it. But just that, like, right. Be okay with the bad version. Like it's, there's no like police that come after you, like the PDF police. It's okay. And that's what people kind of get stuck on.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that up, because I think a healthy caveat to what I said is this idea that like analysis paralysis is not good. That's not healthy. Doing these things in the absence of taking action is not good. So it's not a matter of having the perfect foundation. It's a matter of just like documenting the steps and moving on. And the idea is to save time in the future, not get bogged down in perfectionism. So that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. What else do you kind of see people getting bogged down on in the early stages, other than just like analysis paralysis?
Yeah, I think that it's really important to consider, like from a 30,000 foot perspective, the type of customer support that you want to offer, like what you want your brand to be known for. We really prefer to work with clients that have an emphasis on providing amazing customer support, but not everybody does. But I think it's important to decide like what you're going to do and how you're going to do that. Establishing expectations and KPIs, like, hey, we expect for chats to be answered within 5 minutes or less. We expect for emails to be answered within an hour or less. And then just looking at the higher level things of the type of experience that you want to deliver to your customers, and the culture that you want to build at your company. So things like going above and beyond. I remember when I was a teenager, I think I was like 18, I worked at Home Depot, and we used to get in trouble if we would point to, like if someone came up and said like, hey, where light switch is at, if we would point to where they are, it's like, oh, it's aisle 18, like we would get in trouble for that. Like the expectation was that we would go above and beyond. We would walk them over there, even if it wasn't our department, and we would show them, where the item is. And a corollary now in the world of remote customer support is if a customer writes in and they ask you a question about X, and you know that when they go down that path, they're naturally going to have a question about Y, well, include that in your answer. If they ask you a question like, hey, what would you recommend? Like, can your app do this? Or do you guys sell this? If the answer is no, then make some suggestions. It's the idea of going above and beyond to build that brand culture and sort of, just the culture of your brand and the way that you treat your customers.
How do you train people to actually do that kind of above and beyond? Because I do love when Home Depot, when I ask, where like these little tiny screws are, and they're like, oh, let me come like hold your hand and bring you down and like, I wouldn't find that on my own. Like, but how do you actually train people to do that, especially in a remote culture where you can't see them pointing? Like, how do you get them to actually understand, like lead the customer and go with them and help them with that?
It's a great question. The way we handle it is through vetting very early on. So we definitely provide training. We have an internal boot camp, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But our focus is really from the beginning. I mean, we hire 0.5% of the total number of people that apply, and we ask them a series of questions that are really designed to assess their interest in providing next level customer support. We want to find those people that naturally do that. So we have kind of like little snippets built into questions that evaluate for that. So I really recommend when founders hire somebody, whether that's outsourced or on their own team, that they really evaluate that person's personality and mindset from the very beginning in the way that they answer questions, both in written form and then also, in interview, during the interview process. And then after we hire them, so like I said, it's a very small percentage that we hire, we put them through an internal boot camp where we go into really great detail. And by the way, like they've already been hired with the expectation that they have excellent writing quality. We've already vetted all of that, and that they have an emphasis on empathy and really providing high level of service to the customers they interact with. But from there, we provide a lot of training to them that really instills the idea of our brands. Like we deliver next level customer support. Here are the ways that we do that. And we have discussions with that. So we have a full-time dedicated trainer that provides training to them and also writing coaching, et cetera. But it's setting the tone from the very beginning. And I find that like in most cases, people really rise to those expectations. It's just like how is it that Chick-fil-A over and over provides this incredibly high level of service, and yet like McDonald's, Taco Bell, some of these other ones just don't. Like it has something to do with the culture and the expectations. And then we're like very much like the Netflix philosophy. We're quick to let people go if we have to, if they're not meeting that expectation. And it's not without working with them and giving them a chance, but we just really focus on maintaining a culture of excellent customer experience, and just been a real priority.
What's an example of a question you would ask to test for empathy? Like, I've done a lot of interviews and testing for the hard skills, right? The technical skills, I got it. Like, can you do this? Like, there's a process of that. But testing for empathy, it's definitely more of a soft skill. What is some questions you'd actually ask to find out, like, are you a nice person? Like, how do you actually get that out of someone?
It's theoretical scenario-based questions. So, for example, someone writes in and they are on a free trial of a Shopify app and they ask for an extension. What do you do? Or like we will give them information. Like I own a small SaaS business that's in the Shopify space, and I'll literally say, okay, here's the name of the business. Here's what we do. Like here's basic foundational elements, and here's a customer question. And I'll literally like quote, hey, this is Bob. I'm really upset because of this, this, and this, and I'll evaluate how they answer that. And then we have other questions like I think one that we ask is, you found out that your friend has been falsely accused and is imprisoned in a foreign country. What do you do? So like little things like that. It's like, it's kind of goofy, but like it's amazing how we can vet people just based on the way they answer that. And also just getting a feel, interviewing them, and I really think that all of us, or certainly most of us, have kind of a sixth sense about people and the way that they connect on a call and the way they answer questions, et cetera. So it's kind of a combination of all of those things. Yeah,
it's definitely, it's a tough position to hire for, right? Because you have to get on a call and you have to kind of really talk to someone like face to face. I know like the last support position we hired for here, quite literally got hundreds of resumes, and you bring those down to people. Okay, so let's get a subset. And now, okay, let's get people on the phone. And by the time you're done with it, you're like, I've just talked to a lot of people to find, that one hire. So,
Charles, real quick before we move on, I think it's really important to consider that, like, it has to start at the top. It has to start with the founder. If you as a founder don't deeply, deeply believe in this, if you don't deliver that level of support, it's like I still answer, like we have a team of 20 staff, but for my own small SaaS, like I still provide all the customer support because I want to have an ear to the ground. Like I want to never forget what it's like to provide that initial support. And that really helps me stay aligned, and it helps me continue that focus of excellent customer support. But you can't tell somebody to provide excellent customer support if you don't believe in that yourself, or if you don't provide that yourself. So I think a good first step is to deeply evaluate that and make sure that you're really aligned with that. It's not just something that you say, but it's like really what you believe and what you're passionate about for your brand.
One thing I've always thought of with that, or kind of just seen when you see behind the scenes a founder, how they talk to the team internally about customers behind their back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right.
Like when you're behind the scenes, you can tell the founders that kind of like almost talk kind of like down about customers and users. And then you realize like, that's how their team is talking to the public, to their customers about that. But the founders, internally, they're like, I love my users. Like they're like the biggest, like they're like the cheerleaders for the users. It just seems like it comes out in the support team. I don't know. That's at least what I've kind of, from my limited seeing inside enough companies, it's almost how the founder talks about the users that influences how the support team will talk about the users.
Yeah, it's the idea that the internal culture seeps out no matter what, and you can't stop that. So I think that's so critical. I mean, the way that we treat our team, like it starts there, and like we treat them like they're very valuable to us because they are. So in terms of like paying more, like providing better benefits and just autonomy, like I despise screen recording software. I hate it because like I don't want my screen to be monitored constantly. I don't want to feel like I'm being monitored. Like we want to extend trust, and it's amazing how many people will rise to that level of trust. They really want to meet expectations. So the point is to like consider the internal culture of your company and make sure that's locked on. And then the natural outflow of that is the way that the team is going to treat customers.
Yeah, I like that. When you said you guys do an internal boot camp, what is it? So someone kind of finally gets a job, and then what are they actually kind of going, like, how do you get someone trained up on someone else's business? Like, what's that look like?
Yeah, well, the internal boot camp is an internal training before they're ever client facing. So they go through several days of training. They're working with the trainer. We have a lot of material as it relates to writing quality, grammar, writing structure, tone, empathy, like next level support, the way that we interact on our team. So just healthy remote communication. Everybody's remote, and we use Slack. So just like all of our expectations in terms of the way we communicate. So all of that is handled initially in that boot camp training. And then after that, they're introduced to the client. And that's when the client training begins. So we ask our client to provide that initial training to their agent or agents, as well as the team leader. So from the beginning, we have a backup with the team leader being trained concurrently. And then that process takes from sometimes as little as a few days to a week, and sometimes multiple weeks if it's a really complicated technical product. But in the e-commerce world, 1 week on average. And then we take it from there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice part. Support for e-commerce. I feel like there's a lot of level one, like where's my tracking number, where's my order, those kind of questions. Does this fit, that sort of thing? How do you guys handle when it actually is like a research question on, I was just working with an automotive retailer, right? Where does this part fit in this Mustang or whatever? And people will call with those sort of, or I used to sell equipment for like carnival machines, and like, does this heater work? Does this heating element work in this machine? And as a support person, you kind of have to go and like open PDFs and start like looking around. Do you guys train people to do all that? Is it like a knowledge database? Because a lot would just be literally going to like a manufacturer's website, digging in, finding a part number. And it's one of those things, there's no like direct process. It's more literally just Googling and doing a bunch of research a lot of times.
It is our expectation that every member of our team goes above and beyond and provides a next level customer support, including, doing research and things like that. It's also very important that they communicate really well. So for example, if an average ticket takes maybe 5 minutes to answer, depending on the client, if we have a team member that's spending, say 20 minutes or 30 minutes and their output is lower because they're really digging into a particular ticket, like I mentioned, we don't use screen recording software, but we instead ask them to prioritize really excellent communication. So we ask them to make an internal note, say like on Help Scout or Intercom or whatever platform we're using, to say, hey, I spent about 20 minutes researching this ticket so I could provide an excellent answer to the customer. And also it comes to like back to healthy expectations. Like when I have a conversation with a prospective client, I make sure that they know our focus on customer support, and I make sure it's a good match. And not everybody is, and that's okay. Like there are some people that really want to provide sort of like super fast answers. They don't want to go above and beyond. They want to run their business that way, and that's fine. But we have a conversation up front to say like, hey, this is our brand. This is the level of support we provide, and just to make sure it's a good fit. No, I guess like to play devil's advocate, there's times when that can be too much, or it becomes unreasonable. So there's a point where we need to have a conversation with the client and say like, hey, like this is how much time we're finding that the agent is spending providing this level of support. Like, how's that working for you? Are you good with that or whatever? There's always a line, right? And it's rare, but sometimes customers can kind of push that. So it's to be reasonable as well.
Yeah, I think there's a match between the agent and what the business requires for that type of ticket, right? I've done e-commerce support before where you should basically between when you touch the ticket and when you close the ticket, it should be in the minutes, like, sub 5, right? But then what Spark Shipping, there's some tickets where I'd expect easily someone could spend over an hour in a particular ticket. Totally normal. They might, when you talk about screen recordings, you're talking about screen recording from like a time tracker. Sometimes we do screen recordings, just literally someone support agents recording their screen to send to a user on.
Oh, I'm a huge fan of that.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah,
like send a Loom video.
Oh, totally. Oh man, people are blown away by that. It's funny because I use this all the time at my small software business when I provide support. But like people it would take me maybe 10 or 15 minutes to write out a fairly lengthy reply with screenshots, or I can make a 2-minute video and just show them what to do, and even better yet, do it for them if that's appropriate, and send them the video. People are just blown off their chairs. Like they cannot believe that. It's funny because like I just saved myself, 10 or 12 minutes. It's like, but they're just amazed by that. And it creates this like sort of a personal connection as well, because we're so removed. Like this is the thing about that we have to fight against with remote communication is that that distance between people, But so when I record a Loom video, I like to have my face in the bottom left corner or whatever.
Yep.
So I'm just making a connection with the customer, and they know I'm a human, and they know I'm specifically talking to them. They can see, my screen. I'm on their website or whatever, and it's just very connective, and really builds brand loyalty, which is a great bonus.
Yeah, I feel like that, like you said, they're talking to you, right? Like,
Yeah.
we had a support issue the other day with eBay, and somebody had to reach out to them and contact them, and you read the response, and you're like, is this even to me? Like, this could be literally to anyone. Like, I don't even know. Like, you write this like one page long email, and you get back this like 2 lines, and you're like, they could have just copied them. This most likely is copy and pasted. Versus with the Loom, like you said, if it's appropriate, they're like in your account, they're basically doing the setup for you, and there's no confusion. And then you can go back, replay it, and yeah, I love doing that. Any other kind of things like that you've kind of found work very
to your point
very good
of,
to like personalize?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I want to speak to a little bit more. I think saved replies as a template are a great idea and necessary, because the truth is, like, most businesses have redundant questions, but there's no reason that the agent or the founder, if they're answering support tickets themselves, can't personalize that. So you start with a snippet, you have the basic information that they need, but, add some personalization, things that are even obviously personalized, like, hey, happy Friday, or good afternoon, like things like that. And then also restating their question. So yeah, you're going to provide a templated answer, but restating the question so they know they were listened to, right? Like, I mean, we all desire to be listened to, and you can prove that you've listened to their question by just sort of recapping that in a quick sentence. Another thing that I ask our team to be really careful of is to make sure that they're catching all of the sentence or all of the questions within the customer query. So attention to detail. So as you know, a customer might write in, they have a question initially, and then a lot more information, and then another little question buried at the end. So being really careful to grab those and make sure that that they're just paying really close attention and listening well to the customer.
Yeah, that's one of those things when you read some users, when they send a support ticket, it's like a 2-line support message where you're like, all right, 2 lines, statement, question, got it, let's do this. Other times you get this like wall of text, and there's like question, and you can see there's like question marks peppered inside, and you're like, all right, this is gonna take some time just to like untangle, and like, all right, let's read, pick out the questions, respond to each one, because people then will go, oh, did you not respond to all my questions? You're like, I don't know, there are 6 of them. Like, did I miss one? Was it a question? And like, so you need to really, on some of them, spend your time, and like, there's time of just like breaking it apart, just so you can actually get in line. And I think what people miss, and it helps to keep in mind, is you spend all this time and effort and money acquiring customers, right? You spend ad dollars, you're spending marketing dollars, all this stuff. And then to lose someone, to drop the ball, it's like literally like you're right there. You're almost in the end zone, and you just drop the ball on something that could have just been a nice experience. And that's kind of, I feel like people need to frame support like that it's, you've spent all this money and resources and time already, and now you're just like, this is the finish line, and you just need to do a good job here.
Yeah. I think all of us at different times as founders are guilty of overemphasizing sales and marketing at the expense of, what would it be? Customer loyalty, longevity, reducing churn. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's crazy to spend, and I'm not throwing stones. I've totally been there, but like, they spend so much money and effort acquiring a new customer only to lose them through an interaction that could have been better, or lack of checking in with them or whatever. It's like just painful. And to that end, another thing that comes to mind that I think is really important is to like, whether you hire internally as a founder or you hire externally a support company, to give your team permission to make decisions on behalf of the customer, to extend trust to them. For example, refund requests. Like, what are the parameters that they can provide excellent service? Like, they don't have to come back to you, and also like it's interruptive for them to go back to the founder, but also it provides a poor poor level of support to sort of like, let me get back to you on this refund. So to extend trust and permissions to the agents to be able to give refunds up to a certain dollar amount, or effectively do whatever within reason it takes to please the client. I've heard of famous brands like Ritz-Carlton that allow their staff I don't remember the dollar amount, but some obscene dollar amount that the staff can do whatever they think is necessary to provide next level customer support to their customers. So things like that, where you empower the team to be able to provide that, and they feel like they have a sense of autonomy and authority to provide that level of support.
What do you say? And I've seen a lot of founders get hung up in this one, where like refunds, something like that, where you just think these support agents are going to like run amok and give everyone a refund. And I see people get like really hung up on that. Like it never happens, but like I see people really get worried about this. What do you kind of tell people to, like that's, and I know it's not realistic, but only from, I've done it, but like before you've done it, how do you tell people like that's not going to happen? Like, trust me, it just never happens.
Yeah, that's why I think it's good to have a conversation early on and just set really clear expectations. So it would be my job to talk to the founder and say, okay, Joe, what are you thinking in terms of like maximum dollar amount that we can extend permission to the team to refund, and just also having a bit of a philosophical conversation on like scarcity mindset versus an abundant mindset. So like not like it's I don't want to go in and sort of like act like I know everything about their business and kind of take over, but I think it's fun and interesting to have a philosophical conversation and just talk about things like that. It's like, well, what do you generally feel about refunds? Because in my experience, I found that like if we're quick with refunds, even if we get taken advantage of on occasion, and that sometimes happens, it's better in the long run to have that more abundant mindset, and it's better for the brand. Like in the e-commerce world, like I'll do almost anything to avoid a negative review within reason. But my point is, I will even let people take advantage of me to a point to avoid that negative impression on the business. It's just not worth the damage to be right. Even when I know they're taking advantage or that they're in the wrong, it's not worth it to win. For me to be right at the expense of the business. So it's thinking about things like that. But my point is, it's fun to have conversations with founders that are along those lines and just kind of see how they're thinking about things like that.
Yeah, that's interesting to frame it like that with the abundance mindset on just like, and just understanding 99 point whatever percent of these orders are just going through, everything's just like fine. It's the support's really dealing with that like 1%. Like they've already, something has gone, something weird has already happened. So now how are you like solving that? And like, just let the other 99% do their thing. They probably went flawless. They got their tracking number. They got their product. They're happy. But this 1%, like how do we deal with that? And if we have to give refunds on some percentage of that, so be it, right? It's part of it. And I think a lot of people going into it don't realize this is part of it. You're going to have to, there's some percentage of revenue. I don't know what that number looks like on average, but there's some percentage of revenue that's just assumed to be refunds. And I think once you just kind of get okay with that, it's fine. Yeah.
It's kind of a silly example, but I go back to Chick-fil-A again. I think like they're an example of a company that has a really abundant mindset. And you could use the example of Southwest too, but like Chick-fil-A, they'll give you a ton of sauces like for no extra money. And then like I've been through drive-thrus at other fast food places and they're like, oh, can I get some barbecue with my fries? Like, oh yeah, that'll be 50 cents. Like things like that. It's like, I really appreciate the brand more when there's that level of abundance. Southwest Airlines with the free bags, like little things like that. I don't know. I think reciprocity comes in there. Like, I think that builds brand loyalty when a brand is willing to go above and beyond. It just has an abundant mindset in general. I think it just really builds customer loyalty.
And it probably depends on the type of company you're trying to build, right? Last week's episode, we were talking about just there's some folks that play in that like very low end, like you're competing over price, and that's a way to do it, right? That's a business model. Amazon, Walmart, they're not small companies, right? So they've done okay. But like it's almost as a smaller retailer, you can't compete there. So you have to compete on these other ways of doing business, like that brand loyalty, going above and beyond, because you can't compete with Walmart. Like you're not going to beat them at that game. And that's different. Like Walmart doesn't give great support. They don't need to. They give the lowest prices. When you're going in, that's what you're going to get. And you can't compete with their prices.
Expectation.
Yeah. So, and it's a match, but as a small retailer, you're not going to compete with Walmart. You're not going to compete with Amazon. So you need to compete on some other playing field. And this is an option. When you talk about customer success, I think we touched upon that earlier briefly. What's the difference? And I always see people kind of use these terms interchangeably. How would you define one versus the other?
Yeah, I really think they're quite different. The way I look at it is customer support is almost completely reactive. So answering support tickets, chats, phone calls, et cetera, where customer success by design should be almost completely proactive. So that's concierge level onboarding for a SaaS product. So maybe a SaaS product that supports e-commerce retailers. I used to work for one in customer success, and we provided email automation. So we would do concierge level onboarding where a new client would sign up, we would walk them through the product, set it up for them. It's also proactive outreach. So, relationship building. So in the e-commerce world, there's maybe people that buy products on a recurring basis at sort of a larger scale. So it's maintaining and growing relationships with people like that. It's also looking out for churn. So in the case of a SaaS product that maybe supports e-commerce retailers, evaluating the customers that may be likely to churn based on certain metrics. So like, hey, they haven't sent out an email in this many days, et cetera. So it's being just really, really proactive and deeply supporting the customer through a meaningful personal relationship.
With e-commerce, are you actually folks proactively reaching out like a high order value order comes in? People like reaching out to them saying like, "Hey, you've spent X amount. Like, should we just talk about is it that level of customer success?"
Yep, totally. And I get that like this is not something, whether we're talking about SaaS or e-commerce, not every SaaS business or not every e-commerce company can afford customer success. It's really the higher end products that generally can. So in the SaaS world, customers are paying $500 to $2,000 a month. In the e-commerce world, I remember one of the customers we used to support at the email company I worked at was a company that sold like computer racks. So their clients would spend thousands of dollars and very much at the kind of enterprise type level, or at least medium business to enterprise type level. So in situations like that, like definitely there's room to reach out to those folks and cultivate relationships, get to understand them better, understand their needs. Like when would they be likely to need to make a recurring purchase? Like what are their goals? Are they just trying out the computer racks in hopes to buy them for all 50 locations or whatever? Like just to understand the way they're thinking and kind of what their plans are. But I would argue that you can automate some of that even for e-commerce businesses that have maybe a little bit more affordable product, and send out a sort of automated emails, getting to know them, asking what their intent is, et cetera. Especially if it's maybe on the wholesale side or something that's a little higher ticket price.
Yeah, I was talking to a user here, and they sell IT equipment to schools. So like, average order values in thousands of dollars sort of thing. And there's orders that are tens of thousands. So they call every order. Someone in there is making a phone call. Hey, let's just review this order. Let's talk about it. And someone's going on the site submitting a very large order, and they just proactively call them back every time and just talk through it. And some of these just like, right, the shipping, it's going to come on a loading dock. You have a floor jack. Like some of these, at the higher dollar value, there's some just real questions you have to ask on, okay, do you have a lift? Like, what's that look like? Do we need the ramp on the back of the truck? Like, versus, like you said, some lower, if you're selling t-shirts or something, you're probably not calling every user. It just doesn't make sense. So I feel like success can fit into certain businesses, but not others in that case. You mentioned automation. Where do you see that kind of fitting into support? Like, how do you pepper in just enough automation without being over automated and still have the human factor?
Yeah, it depends on if you're talking. So when you say automation, the first thing I think of are two things, like chatbots, and then second would be inbox automation, like help saved replies, internal docs, external docs, et cetera. But it's probably not a surprise, I'm not a fan of chatbots. And I recognize that in certain situations, they may make sense, but I love people and I love connecting and I love that human experience. And I just feel icky when I get to a chatbot. Like I do everything I can to sort of like trick the system to give me a real person to talk to. I'm just not a fan.
If you ever read through the raw logs, users everyone's trying to just like figure out how to get around the chatbot as quick as possible.
Yes.
It's amazing. Yeah.
I am not a fan. Now, that said, I recognize that in certain use cases, it may make sense. But what I am a fan of is automation in the inbox that makes support more efficient, not at the expense, like we talked about earlier of personalization, but there are ways that you can blend the two to provide a better level of service. For example, like chat responses, those can be, you can put in a sort of automated response and customize or personalize the bookends of the response and deliver something that's really high quality. I don't like automation where it's obvious to the customer that things are being automated. And I think it can lead to lazy work sometimes, It can lead to an over-reliance on these automations. You've had that feeling where it's like you're talking to a human in a sort of a chat sequence or email sequence, and you know that the answer they pasted in is totally just pasted in. And what I mean by that's it's like, okay, the first paragraph was relevant, but the last two are really not. So that's another thing is like you can paste in an automated reply and then sort of edit out the irrelevant parts. And I was chatting in with Xfinity Internet the other day, and it was very much that. It's like, I know what you're doing there. It's like, I don't really like that so much. It just felt a little spammy,
Yeah, I've even used on automated replies sometimes just having here's the whole automated template, and here's different options inside of there, and it's made so you're going to go in and have to delete, 3 out of the 4 of these, and you pick the one you want. So it's basically just like, hey there, X, and then you fill that in, best regards, and then there's different things you could have in there. Hey, here's a link to our pricing, here's a link to our demo, here's a link to, 5 different things. And then you just say, okay, let me remove the ones that don't make any sense. And I can never send this as is. I have to rework this. So it sets a certain expectation that I can still use it and get some value out of it. And I'm more editing than having to type. So it still gives you the best of both worlds.
Yeah. That reminds me, Charles, of another really important attribute, of a really good customer support agent or customer success, and that is high trait conscientiousness, someone that really pays attention to detail. And we screen for that as one example. You asked about example questions earlier. We'll say something like, in less than 75 words, tell us about a hobby of yours and why you enjoy it. So the point of the question, of course, we want to get to know them a little bit better, but the main point of the question is to see if they follow directions. And you'd be surprised at how many people will go over that limit. It's like, well, they clearly didn't follow directions. So we'll have a few of those built in. And if they miss so many points in that process, we don't further them in the application process. Because in my mind, if they're missing that at that level, and you would imagine that when people are applying for a job, they should be paying really close attention to sort of that process. So if they miss those things there, then I can expect that they're likely to miss them in a support interaction. And not everybody is pays real close attention to detail, is really conscientious. So I think it's important to find those people for just that point, so they can craft responses that are quite detailed, and you can expect them not to miss questions within a customer response, et cetera.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've noticed with the hiring. There's a trick of just hey, could you do me a favor and follow up with me tonight about this, and send me a meeting request for next week. You pick the time, anytime I'm available. Just send me a meeting request for next week by tonight. And if the person can't do that, and you give them 8 hours or whatever, give them a reasonable amount of time to do something. And if they can't do that thing, where you're not paying, did you not care? What happened here? And if there's no, I got really sick, my kid got sick, that's what, fine, I get it, things happen. But if someone can't follow that, a simple thing, like you said, some detailed set of instructions is just going to go off the rails.
Yeah, it's a good point. And we try, we try to recognize that, hey, none of us are perfect. We're going to make mistakes. We build it into our system where we expect a certain sort of score when they go through that process. We're not looking for perfection, but you can just get a read on people. If they're missing several questions like that, missing the details, it's pretty, you can definitely expect that they're going to be doing that when they actually get on the job.
Before I let you go, you mentioned the one last thing, and I see people get too into this or not enough. Usually people follow one or the other, but you mentioned having some sort of metrics and KPIs and those sort of things. Where do you stand on that? And how do you balance going KPI crazy and we're gonna measure how many minutes you've been in per ticket, to then there's other folks that are just KPIs, whatever. They just don't measure anything. Where do you kind of fall on that?
Yeah. I'm not a fan of setting finite KPI expectations across the board, saying, oh, it's exactly this number of minutes. I can give you a rough average, but it's very client specific. So I think it's important for each founder to really consider, what is the level of service that they're wanting to deliver? What is the cost of their product? How technically complex is it? What's reasonable? Should a chat take this long to finish? Should an email take this long to finish, et cetera? And then I'm a big fan of just really, really healthy communication. And I don't like setting like an overwhelming number of KPIs. I really like the idea of boiling down the most important few and setting those expectations with the team, and then also expecting them to communicate really, really well. And we're a huge fan of using the notes section in like Help Scout, Intercom, et cetera. So the agent can document like, hey, this is a little bit of an edge case situation. Here's what I did, et cetera. So the founder can see that. But I think it's important to have KPIs, but not an overwhelming number where they just, it's sort of like, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. It's that sentiment. So I think it's important to boil that down to just the most important few.
Yeah. And any number you give someone, right, they're going to push hard on that number and then kind of ignore the other numbers. And if you give them too many numbers, then they're going to pick one and it might not be the one you're looking for. So having, like you said, being very particular about which ones, because those are the ones they're going to focus on. And if you give them too many, like you said, there's no focus. So cool. I think that's a good place right
Absolutely.
there. Thanks. I think that's very helpful. If people want to kind of check you out, check out what you're working on, where can they do that? Where's the best place?
Yeah, probably the best place would be on our website. It's xfusion.io. So it's xfusion.io. My email is jim@that domain. You can find me on LinkedIn would be a good place. David and I, my co-founder, we love to talk to founders. We love to talk shop. Neither of us are salespeople. We don't have a sales background. We love just connecting and talking about founders' businesses and getting to know them. So we'd love to have any conversations with any of your listeners and just talk shop.
Awesome. I'll drop links in the show notes and definitely folks should reach out. So thanks a lot for coming on, Jim. That was appreciated.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Really appreciate you having me.